Hello everyone, my name is Stacy and welcome to the Reading Alchemist. So this video is going to be my monthly wrap-up for the month of August. In the month of August, I actually did participate in a readathon, and the readathon that I participated in was a whole month-long readathon, and that was Magical Readathon Aurelium, the autumnal edition, in August. And for this one, we essentially had to pass harder exams and take a whole lot of classes. For my career, which is to be an archmage, I'll put the profile up here, I actually had to read 8 books in the month of August in order to actually achieve everything that I need to for this round of Aurelium, and I actually managed to read 9 books. So you best believe it, I did complete all 8 prompts that I was supposed to, including 1 extra quest prompt. So let's not only go through my syllabus, the prompts I had to fulfill, and what books I essentially read for them, and do my whole wrap-up spiel, but let's also do my main stats right now. So, as I was saying earlier, in August, I read a total of 9 books. 7 of them are featured here in this stat because I read them physically. They are Vengeful by Miss Victoria Schwab, Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Drake Kristoff, Midnight Library by Matt Haig, The Last Olympian by Rick Riordan, FullMetal Alchemist Volume 2 Collector's Edition by Hiromu Arakawa, Heatwave by TJ Klune, and The Promised Neverland by Kaiyu Shira. All the books that I read in the month of August. I also read Epic by Serena Bowen and Now Kennedy, and The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. All 9 books, a grand total of 3,250 pages, which is really good. 1 middle grade, which technically it's not really classified as middle grade anymore. That is Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. 3 books classified as YA, FullMetal Alchemist, Heatwave, and Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. The rest 4 were adult books. So that's Vengeful, it's an adult book. Midnight Library is an adult book. Epic and The Name of All Things are all considered books for adults. Most of these books that I've read here are fantasy. In fact, almost all of them are fantasy. Gemina is a sci-fi, a science fiction. And I read 2 books that feature main LGBTQ+ elements. Heatwave by TJ Klune and Epic by Serena Bowen and Now Kennedy. Epic by Serena Bowen and Now Kennedy is, of course, a romance. I ended up giving actually 3 books this month a total of 5 stars. Vengeful by V.E. Schwab, I gave 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I gave Midnight Library by Matt Haig a reread for me. It got 5 stars first time. And for me, star ratings for rereads of books do not change. And of course, Heatwave by TJ Book Daddy Klune, of course, got 5 stars for me. You all know this. He is my absolute favorite author. So far, I've yet to give a single one of his books less than 5 stars. Absolutely loved it. I can't wait to do a reread vlog for you guys on this series. That's absolutely one of my favorites, and tab it up for you guys and do a spoiler reading vlog for it. While the stats are not out of the way, let us get into the actual meat and beef of this wrap-up. So, we're going to go in order of these books when I read them. So, the first book that I read and finished in the month of August was Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. For Magical Aurelium, this was to read an O. the ordinary prompt for spells and incantations, which is to use a color wheel and randomly generate a color. So I'm going to insert that footage of me choosing the color. Okay, so one of my prompts for Magical Readathon Autumn Equinox Edition is to random generate a color and choose a book that features that color in the cover or in the title. I'm probably going to do cover, so we're going to spin and see what it gives me. Red. So the book I read has to feature red in the cover. And as you can see from that color wheel spin, we got the color red. So I had to feature a book that has a lot of red on it, and Vengeful, particularly this US cover, definitely features a whole lot of red on it. Mainly black, but there is red on it. I have already read Vicious, so my next task was to read Vengeful by E. Schwab, and I absolutely ended up loving this book. Before I read Vengeful, I did read Vicious back in December of 2021, and since reading Vicious by V.E. Schwab, I've been thinking about it nonstop, so I'm pretty certain I'm going to change my rating of that book to 5 stars, as I did really enjoy it. In terms of Call Pile score, which is what I use to rate all my books, I gave this a 9 for characters, 8 for atmosphere. The atmosphere in this book kind of really jumped around, and we do feature a sort of prison in this book, and I don't particularly like the atmosphere of prisons. It's not a turn-off for me. I just really don't like it. They're kind of not spooky, but they're just not really fun to read about. 9 for writing. Again, Miss Schwab, her writing is pretty good, and I really do enjoy it, especially her adult writing, as I've read the first Cassidy Blake book in her middle grade series, and the writing of that's a little too middle grade and pretentious, but I love her adult writing. A 9 for plot. Really good. But what really did it over the top for me was the intrigue in this book. I wish I could tell you guys a full, synopsis of the book, but let me just say the intrigue had me jumping out of my seat. I could barely put this book down. And that's a rarity for me with books. This book was a very fast read. Very fast read. The chapters are fairly short. It's fairly fast-paced. The intrigue really got me, even though I particularly knew maybe what was going to happen. But the intrigue for this book was super high, as this book, what was supposed to be a duology, is now going to be a trilogy, and I have no idea where she's going to end up taking Victorious, which is book 3. I have no idea. As a character who was present for mainly the majority of the first book and the second book died, I have no idea where she's going to take this, and I'm very intrigued to find out. I gave this book a 9 for logic and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it a 9.0, which is a 5-star, a low 5-star, but still a 5-star nonetheless. Very glad that I read Vengeful by V.E. Schwab. I'm going to get Vicious in probably a paperback copy, and I may do a reading vlog of it when Victorious gets announced, and do a reading vlog of Vicious, Vengeful, and Victorious for you guys. That would be really fun. The second book that I read in the month of August is Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. This is the second book in their Illumine files. It is an entire mixed media style storybook. Essentially, it's a little bit hard to describe. Essentially, in the beginning, this planet was illegally mined. Miners came, another organization came over to take it over, and then so refugees fled. and they're essentially trying to escape. It turns out it's a whole government thing, and really exciting. Another really fast-paced book, due to the mixed media format, as some of the pages barely have any words at all, so it's very easy to get through. Apparently, a lot of the mixed media books that I read, I like this series a little bit better, and the audio for this book is fantastic, as the whole audiobook series for this trilogy is full cast audio. So really enjoyed listening to the audiobook of it and reading along, because that is how I like to do my audiobooks. For this book, I ended up giving it a 9 for characters, and 8 for atmosphere, 8 for writing, 8 for plot, 9 for intrigue, 8 for logic, and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it an 8.43 out of 10, which is a 4-star. That's a fairly actually pretty high 4-star rating. I wish I could kind of tell you guys what mainly this book was about. I did in fact really enjoy reading this book, even though science fiction is not really one of my favorites to read about, as I like mainly dystopian style science fiction, and this was true science fiction. But nevertheless, it was very good. I did enjoy it, and I'm looking forward to reading the third book. Gemina was for my only prompt for Artificiary for O, which was to read a book featuring artificial intelligence, as from the first book, Gemina does feature an AI. So that was the prompt for that book. The third book that I read in the month of August was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This is actually a reread for me, as I read this book last year in, I want to say October. I read Midnight Library, November. I read this book back in November. And since reading this book, I actually have read another Matt Haig book, but I'll talk about that one later in another wrap-up. So yeah, this book essentially is a standalone, as some of Matt Haig's books are. In this book, we follow a girl named Laura Seed, who ends up one day deciding that she doesn't want to live anymore after events happen in her life. She essentially commits suicide, and she ends up being swept away to the Midnight Library. And in this world, Midnight Library is essentially a place where you can essentially relive past experiences and see and read future experiences that you could have. And essentially, you end up, if you like the world you get swept into, you can go back and forget that you essentially commit suicide, but you will forget your past life details. And it's about our main character essentially discovering that she does want to, in fact, live again and experience life again. So, yeah, it's also a very hard-hitting book. If you are reading this book, you need to read it at a time in your life when you're emotionally stable. For this book, I ended up giving it a 9 for characters, a 9 for atmosphere, a 10 for writing. Matt Haig, his writing is very beautiful, and I absolutely love it. An 8 for plot, a 9 for intrigue, and an 8 for logic, and a 10 for enjoyment. Absolutely love this book. Giving it a 9.0 out of 10, which is a 5 stars. I think that's lower than the first time I read this book in terms of the 5-star rating, but who really cares at this point? The next book that I read in the month of August was Last Olympian by Rick Riordan. So this book was the prompt for Inscription, my old prompt for that, and that was to read a childhood favorite. And one of my childhood favorites was the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series by Rick Riordan. And where I'm up to in my reread, as I'm rereading this series, his other series that essentially follows directly after this one, in order to read the Trials of Apollo series, which I've never read. Granted, I probably don't need to, but I figured I would anyways. I'd reread them all. And yeah, so the Percy Jackson and Olympians series is one of my all-time favorites as a child. In terms of the reread, I actually remembered. This is back in like 20 years ago. Well, not 20 years ago, like maybe more like 15 years ago. I remembered everything that happened in this book. It's been like 15 years, so my memory is still pretty good. I would be able to tell you guys a lot more about this series, but again, most of you guys have probably read this book series as it's quite popular and know what this is about. Essentially the last one, and essentially there is a big battle in New York. So, in this book, I gave it a 7 for characters, and 8 for atmosphere, 8 for writing, 9 for plot, 9 for intrigue, 9 for logic, and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it an 8.43 out of 10, which is a 4-star, a very high 4-star nonetheless. About the same as Vengeful. I didn't really have a difficult time reading on this. Not really a lot I can talk to you guys about this book, as it is a reread and a last book in a series. I wish I could talk to you guys more about what happened, but unfortunately I can't. But I love Rick Riordan. His writing style is really good, especially in the earlier books in the series. It's quite a funny and witty writing style. And the main thing that I love about the Percy Jackson series is his chapter titles for this are spot on. You'll know if you've read. The next book that I read in the month of August was FullMetal Alchemist Volume 2 by Hiromu Arakawa. This is my favorite TV show in manga form, which is FullMetal Alchemist. It was an actual manga series first, and then it was made into a TV show. But when I started this TV show, I didn't read the manga first and then watched the TV show. As Brotherhood in terms of manga is my favorite, because it follows more true to the manga, and the ending for these volumes matches the ending in the TV show, as it wasn't fully completed yet. Now it has been. And I figured since FullMetal Alchemist is my favorite series, that I would get them all in this nice collector's edition. So the first one features Ed on the cover. This one features Alphonse. I wish I could give you guys more of a synopsis of what this is about, but this essentially follows Edward and Alphonse Elric. They are brothers, and essentially they live in the countryside. Their father is an alchemist. He leaves. We find out later why he leaves. And essentially they grow up with their mother. However, their mother gets sick and dies, and all these two brothers want to do is they want to see their mother smile again, so they commit the ultimate taboo of alchemy, which is human transmutation, and this story follows them essentially trying to get their bodies back for normal. Yeah, it's honestly, the story as a whole is really touching and really sweet as they're brothers. I have a feeling and soft spot for brothers. So yeah, this book, a 9 for characters, and 8 for atmosphere, a 9 for writing, and 8 for plot, 8 for intrigue, 8 for logic, and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it an 8.43 out of 10, which is a 4-star. While the manga's getting 4 stars for me so far, I think it's because I've already seen what is presented in this manga, which is why it's getting 4 stars for me. If I had read the manga first, we may be in the 5-star range by now, but because I've seen the anime first, and I'm now reading it, that's why it's getting 4 stars for me. But again, I will be getting more of these nice shiny volumes. The next book that I read in the month of August was my most anticipated release of this year so far, up until that point, is Heatwave by TJ Book Daddy Clune. This is the 3rd book in the Extraordinaries trilogy. In this story, we follow Nick and Seth, and it's essentially their superhero origin story. So I wish I could tell you more. I can't. My most anticipated release. You'll be very happy to note. No, this book did indeed get 5 stars from me again. The whole trilogy has gotten 5 stars. I gave this book a 10 for characters, a 9 for atmosphere, a 10 for writing, a 9 for plot, a 9 for intrigue, a 9 for logic, and a 10 for enjoyment, bringing it a 9.43 out of 10, which you guys know is 5 stars. I absolutely love this book. I'm very glad to have bought it physically in order to read these books. While they're not actually, like, fast-paced, his books really have never been fast-paced books for me. I thought this book was actually fairly fast-paced. I loved reading this book. We are definitely going to be doing a spoiler reading log for you guys on this entire series. I will reread this again next year, probably, and we'll do a spoiler reading log for it. Very glad to have read this book. As I didn't state earlier, FullMetal Alchemist was on this prompt, my second prompt of inscription, which was to read a graphic novel, comic, or manga. This is manga. And Heatwave, I put it in for the prompt of Q for alchemy, which is to read a orange book, while the hardcover is mainly yellow. It does have a lot of orange on the cover, so that's why I used for read an orange book. Midnight Library was to read a book on someone's worst list that you think you might like. This was on Reagan from Peruse Project's her worst books list of 2021, and I knew I was going to like it since at that point I had already read it and give it 5 stars. So I decided to just reread this for that prompt. The next book that I read in August was Epic by Serena Bowen and Al Kennedy. This is the 3rd book in their sort of, not trilogy, this is a novella book. In this book we follow Jamie and Wesley. They are professional hockey players who in this book are married, and it essentially follows a cute little storyline of them just trying to enjoy married life together. Us, which I read about a month ago before reading this book, I ended up giving 5 stars and absolutely loving. But this one actually got 4 stars from me. It did on my original count get actually 5 stars from me, but because it was so short, I took it down to 4 stars. But nevertheless, I did absolutely enjoy this end so far to this series. I ended up giving it a 10 for characters, as I do with most of my books that feature LGBTQ plus representation, which Heatwave also had. So a 10 for characters, a 9 for atmosphere, a 10 for writing. Absolutely love the writing in this book. While there are some really smutty scenes, the writing is impeccable. A 8 for plot, intrigue, and logic, and a 9 for enjoyment, giving it an 8.86 out of 10, which is a 4 star. A very high 4 star, almost scraped the 5. Even on my second count through. So yeah, it deserves the 4 stars. It would even deserve 5 stars, but I did end up giving it 4 stars just because it was so short. It was like 50 pages. So for that length alone, I did give it 4 stars. And that book was for one word title, my last prompt for alchemy. As of course, Epic is of course one word. The next book that I read was The Name of All Things by Jen Lyons. This is the 2nd book in the Chorus of Dragons. It's honestly, this book series is really hard to describe, guys. It's essentially, we follow Kieran, who we find out is essentially prophesized to destroy their world. A whole bunch of other characters are telling his story about what happened. So Kieran will tell his part, and then we'll have someone else, an outsider, tell the same story, but from their perspective, which I do think is a really cool concept. But this, for an epic fantasy, this plotline is very hard and very confusing. I'm glad it actually got 4 stars from me. As while it is confusing, I love the idea of it, but I think the next time when I read it, I need to listen to the audiobook and follow along, because I think that might help me more. So for this, a 7 for characters, an 8 for atmosphere, an 8 for writing, a 7 for plot, 7 for intrigue, 7 for logic, an 8 for enjoyment, giving it a 7.43 out of 10, which is 4-star, a medium/low 4-star, might I have you, but a 4-star nonetheless. I will be continuing. We're going to try the audiobook follow along method and see if that improves my rating. Since it's so confusing, I think I need that audiobook. And to read and follow along, I think that's what I need. The name of all things was my actual last prompt, and that was for spells and incantations, my Q prompt, which was to find a book on someone else's TBR and essentially read that book. And Malfa Melnor Reads had, at the time I was creating my TBR for this month, had posted her TBR video, and the name of all things was on it, and that was where I was up to. So that's actually all 8 for my main TBR for August, and then I was able to finish one quest, and that was the quest to read a book with OPNS in the title, and for that I chose a manga, Promised Neverland, Volume 1. So the Promised Neverland is essentially, it's horror. This is YA horror. So essentially it follows 3 main children about age of 11. So you could classify it as middle grade, but it is definitely horror. A 10-year-old should not read this book series. It is about Emma, Norman, and Ray, who essentially live in this house known as Gracefield House. And we find out this world that they are actually living in the demon side of the world. There is a demon and a good side of the world. And they live in the demon side, and these demons eat brains. And we find out that this house is essentially a farm, and at the age of 11, which is prime time for picking, our 3 main characters are going to be shipped out. And they learn this, and they decide to essentially escape. That is the main promise of the Promised Neverland, as they are told from a very young age that they are to not leave the premises. So we learn about that. We learn about them escaping. I actually love the entire first season for the anime, and I decided to read the manga as well. It's because I kind of want to get unconfused, as the second season is very confusing. Well, it's not confusing, but the anime is not done well for the second season, and I kind of want to see if the manga is any better, or at least does it better and includes more details. So this book got a 8 for characters, a 7 for atmosphere, a 7 for writing, an 8 for plot, 8 for intrigue, an 8 for plot, 9 for intrigue, 8 for logic, and a 7 for enjoyment. I think I read this book at entirely the wrong time, as I read it in a weekend up north, and I may have been a little bit stressed out when I read it. So that's why it got a 7 for enjoyment. But I did enjoy it nonetheless. A 7.71 out of 10, which is a 4-star still. I will definitely be continuing with the manga. And when I get to season 2 of the anime, again, on my rewatch, we definitely will be continuing. So all in all, I had a lovely reading month for August. So far, January has still been the top month. For January, I read 10 books. In August, I read 9 books. I'm very happy that I read 9 books. Here's a stack for all of them down below. All the books that you guys read for August, and definitely more reading vlog series that you would like to see me do, which some of these books may be featured in, as I'd be very happy to do a spoiler-filled reading vlog for you guys of some of these books that I've absolutely already read and absolutely adored. Yeah, down below you'll find a link to my description to my Goodreads account, which I update daily and all the other information you may need below, as well as a link to the Magical Readathon announcement, just in case you guys want to check that out as well. Thank you so much to G from Book Roast for hosting the Magical Readathon in August. I absolutely loved it, enjoyed it, and I can't wait to participate again next year. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, we are the one within the all.